Welcome, everyone. Great to be here again, another Friday, a little bit later than usual, but we've got a good reason for that. And welcome once again. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you might be dialing in from. And again, thank you for being here, whether you're with us live or whether you're joining us in replay. We appreciate you being here with us and wanting to engage in this conversation, because I do appreciate that it might sound like a bit of a loaded question and a bit of a sort of loaded topic that we might be going into today, but we have to talk about it. We got to talk about it, and we will talk about it, and we will deep dive into it. And so please feel free at any point joining us in the conversation with comments, with questions, with any reflections that you might have. The comments, the chat section will be monitored throughout the session, and we'll be happy to bring those up as we go. This is the last LinkedIn Live of this month. So this month's theme has been around building DEI credibility. So we've talked about what makes a quote unquote a DEI expert. We've talked about should you hire a DEI consultant or a DEI coach, and today we're taking it another level further, talking about DEI gatekeepers and actually how sometimes we as DEI practitioners become the very blockers to the progress we are trying to make. So we will do some deep dives into some of those questions. And so next week, instead of a live, what you will be receiving from me is a sort of a wrap up or roundup of all the conversations that we've been having so far in a newsletter, in our monthly newsletter. So if you are not signed up to it yet, here's the website. Please make sure that you pop your email there and do not miss out on valuable resources. And just a recap of the things that we've talked about and some of the key takeaways that have come out of these conversations. We're talking about these things and doing some deep dive in a very safe environment within the corporate community. So once again, here's a link to that, and you're welcome to join us anytime. We've got a delicious Sunday self-care session going on this Sunday. So you're welcome to come and join us for that and walk into a new week with a full cup. Right, so that's where we are, and going into today's conversation, like I said, it's quite a loaded one, which is around unpacking DEI and who are the DEI gatekeepers. So I've got two amazing guests with me today who have courageously joined me today and deep dive into this topic, and I can't wait for you to meet them and for the ladies introduce themselves. Just once again, I want to remind that the chat is live, so feel free to, while ladies are introducing themselves, to drop a quick hi and let us know where are you dialing in from. Alrighty, well, let me open up the stage to both of you, Vanessa and Amrita. And Amrita, would you like to kick us off?
Mm-hmm. Of course. Thank you so much, Byra, for having us. I'm Amrita Aggarwal. My pronouns are she and her. And I'm joining this call from the unceded, stolen ancestral territories of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh territories. And I'm really grateful to be here. I work as a JEDI Strategist, which stands for Justice, Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion. And I love this topic. I love this work. And yeah, I'm looking forward to speaking with all of you today.
Thank you, Amrita. Thank you for that introduction, and thank you for being here. Grateful. Vanessa.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Amrita. I'm very excited you're part of this conversation. But we've had previous little link ups, so this is actually our first get together on live. So I'm very excited for the conversation as well. My name is Vanessa Chikaka. I am a lawyer that have recently founded, was now over a year ago, which is absolutely unbelievable. Felix Diversity Strategist, and we focus on race ethnicity trainings specifically for law firms, but we're now branching out into the bigger corporate industry as such. My background is I grew up in Germany. To my mom, who's German, and my dad's from Nigeria, so I have a lot of visits to Nigeria during my early years, and then obviously relocated to the UK, London, where I'm now in 2000 and 11. Well, I was in Kent first, but now I'm in London. So yeah, I'm very excited for this conversation. It is a very complex one. I'm here to listen and learn as well, because it is something where that I guess a question that has been on my mind quite a little bit as well. So I'm very excited to hear also your opinions and views, and happy to share mine, of course.
Thank you, Vanessa. And you just echoed exactly what I have sort of been thinking, that this question has been on my mind for a long time. And so I am excited that I have two courageous ladies willing to unpack this with me. So thank you again, everyone who's joining us in live and replay. We've got some highs in the chat. Hi, everyone. Chris is saying he's dialing from Redford, and he runs his own TRG company. He's a conflict mediator as well as a DEI champion trainer for the RAF. So we've got it sounds like some heavyweights in the chat joining us live as well. So please make sure that all of you join in the conversation. So as we're going into the topic of who are the gatekeepers, I guess there are quite a few ways of going into this conversation. And I would like to sort of take a route of looking at the progress of this work first and foremost, and looking at the progress of this work from wherever the reference point is, whether it's from the beginning of the pandemic, whether it's the sort of racial awakening of 2020, or whether it's the moment when each of you joined this space and are actively contributing to it. So what are your feelings on the progress that we have made over this period of time? And do you feel that we are making the DEI progress at the appropriate speed right now?
I can start. Yeah. So that's a very interesting question, Baiba, and I'm sure Vanessa can add to that as well. But I think, like, in my opinion, there really isn't a pace that we can really take up. I think each and every company, each and every person is so much different that I feel that they're going to do this work at their own pace. But given that, since we've come in, there have been so many milestones that have happened in this DEI journey, I still think that we are way far behind where we should have been. And that is the truth. There's a lot of work to be done. And I don't think we can rush it, but I definitely think that there has to be an awakening, a bigger awakening, I feel, of the other companies, because I'm seeing a lot of the small and medium-sized businesses joining us and, starting their journey with DEI or JEDI. But I'm not seeing the bigger corporations take that step. And I feel that is where the problem lies. And that's where it feels like the pace has not been picked up. What do you think, Vanessa?
I'm unmuting myself. No, thank you so much. And completely, I think it's very difficult actually to say what is the right pace we can go at, because it's such an individual point of view when you look at the different corporations. I'd like to take a step back again. What I always tend to do with these sort of panel discussions or general talks is just to qualify again DEI, right? So I come in as an expert for race, equality, and inclusion. So that is what I'm focusing on, and that's where I can offer the most, assistance and help and guidance. So this is the focus I want to take to answer this question. Because when we say what is the current progress of DEI, I think we can quickly get lost in just generally looking at DEI without actually looking at race and equality, which for me is the topic that is at the forefront of what we do or what I do. I think it is appalling, if not shocking, to compare the progress that has been done specifically with racial equality. And this is not just in the UK, but I think it is across the world, and it is across different, nations and countries. And specifically now, I'm going a little bit into deep waters here, comparing it to the progress that has been done in the other protected characteristic categories. Right. So when I hear that, we've not done any progress, for me, that is quickly associated with, okay, yes, I agree. But that is for me the Black and racial ethnicity standpoint. Let me give you a good example. Even though after all the events, George Floyd, Black Lives Matter, etc., the pandemic, all these big live, large-scale events happening, and a huge wave of awareness coming across the US, coming across the UK, coming across Germany. Those are the countries that I mainly work with, and it'll be interesting to hear your opinions as well. We've had a lot of, and you know this, talk, lip service, interesting debates, but very little action steps as such. In the legal industry, there was a survey that came out actually last week, and they looked at the biggest law firms, US law firms, right? And they said out of the biggest US law firms, 16 of them didn't have one Black partner on as partnership, on the partnership. Yet, and this is important, yet they were included in the most diverse law firm list of the year. Right? So to me, that is where we are at when it comes to progress. Progress somehow seems to be focusing, or has been focused a lot, on all the other categories of the protected, whatever that is, LGBTQ+, transgender, gender in general, disability. For some reason, race and equality, or race and ethnicity, seems to be falling out of that. So that's an interesting, I think, way we can look at progress as such. So for me, I'm with you, Amrita, 100%. There's still a long way to go, but specifically the focus on Black ethnicity and race.
Thank you for those points, ladies, and you both make very valid argument around the fact that what is the progress that we're talking about. Let's narrow it down a little bit. Let's narrow down the question, and then. So, for instance, there was this was not too long ago, but there was this viral tweet going around on Twitter, and it was also brought into LinkedIn, talking about the fact that DEI doesn't take time, that people who hold power could make the change with a snap of a finger if they wanted to, but they choose not to. And it's a bold statement, and whether it's right or wrong, I mean, we can debate about that, but ultimately, I guess there's from the comments on both Twitter and when it was brought on LinkedIn, the key arguments have been around, well, all change takes time. All culture change takes time. We are moving people here. Of course, it will take time. Any systemic change takes time. But then on the other hand, it's also around, actually, James Baldwin's words come to mind when he was talking about this, and he said that you've taken all of my time, you've taken all of my parents' time, you've taken all of my nieces and nephews' time and my children's time. How much time do you need to make your progress, quote unquote, right? So there are two arguments two feelings and two arguments for the same question. One is like, actually, no, it does take time because it's systemic, it's cultural, it's people, it's behaviors, it's whole value systems that we need to unpack here. And again, in different countries and different nations and different historic contexts, it will look differently. But on the other hand, but actually, is this a way for us to, because it's sort of taking time and change takes time. It is weaponized. It is using as a weapon for potentially guarding those comfort zones and not making the progress at the appropriate speed. So I would love to just unpack that a little bit. And, and if we are talking about so gatekeepers in this context, who are the key gatekeepers for the progress that we are trying to make here?
Yeah, I'm happy to take this one. Amrita, I saw yourself on meeting. Okay, I'll go first. Let's keep them separate for now. So first, you said, the whole time it's taking time. Systematic change takes time. Absolutely. I'm not disagreeing. There is no point in having a debate with you about whether or not systematic change or organizational change takes time. 100%. But I think we need to now have a conversation about easy deliverables, low-hanging fruit. That's what I, go into when doing consultancy calls, for example, with law firms or again other corporations, and I ask them, what are the pain points? What are the pressing needs of the organization right now when it comes to race, equality, and inclusion? again, I think it's much easier if you actually break down this whole DEI work into a specific focus and target area. Which brings me to the second point a little bit of gatekeepers. Gatekeepers, oh my goodness, has been such a discussed in my circles theme of who is taking the responsibility, right? That's a little bit of the question. Who's responsible for where we are at right now? Who is responsible for the slow progress? Who's responsible for the lack of representation? Who's responsible for that people at the big resignation? We just want to allocate blame. So I want to take, again, a step back, and I always try to come from an empathetic standpoint. Empathetic learning to me is much more effective. Guilt tripping, shaming, even our white colleagues, let's put it as it is not going to help the situation. We have to look at these issues in a strategic manner. So when we look at gatekeepers, right, the definition of gatekeepers is someone who has the power to control access to either one, information, or to authority, i.e. people. Now, do you have access to control power, do you have the power to control access to information or people? I think we all do. We all do to some extent. But of course, within an organization, there are groups that fall into this definition more than others. In the example of a law firm, right? I would say there are 3 stages of gatekeepers. It's not just the DEI leaders. And I try to really emphasize this. If you think it's the responsibility of your DEI leaders, professionals, and the committee as such to stop racism or to do anti-racist work, think again. It's not going to work. So at the first stage, I would say we have these people that collect. They're sometimes referred to as the handlers. They're the people that sometimes they're interns, sometimes they are support staff. They collect the information of what could go into the organization, right? Information on the latest news of race, for example, information on the latest legal requirements for disability access to the building. These are the people at the very beginning that can either let information in or keep it out. Very important task. But we need to identify who these people are. Stage number 2 are the mid-level managers. 100%. In the law firms, they are usually the associates. They're usually who's the big chunk of your organization, because they will be the ones implementing your policies. Now, if they're not if they don't take on your policies, they are gatekeeping that policy from incorporating into your organization, right? So we need to look at training around that mid-level bunch, if you were to say. Sometimes, and we have studies that show that the mid-level, the associates, are the least demotivated. So sometimes they don't have the thought about now thinking about D&I. It's not a good thing, but that's the reality of life, right? So maybe we need to couple it with motivating them first, and then they have a space in their mind to think about inclusion work, to think about culture work, etc. I'm not saying it's not necessary, but I'm just saying let's look at the reality of things. And then, of course, the last group are your DEI leaders. They are the gatekeepers when it comes to implementation of policies, bringing experts in like you and I, etc., etc. This being said, though, the management should be involved in all 3. As management of an organization, you have to take the responsibility to know what's going on in your organization. There's no way out. Now, to conclude my whole speech here, I just want to take it back to the very beginning. This doesn't mean that we don't have the ability to control access of information to or access to people. I was part of that, industry. I was an associate. As such, even though I didn't fall into, although I would have probably fallen into the mid-level, but on top of that, of course, as an individual, I can bring access into, for example, I reach out to Amrita and say, hey, Amrita, would you mind doing this and this training for the firm? These are things that I can do as an individual. But if you were to break it up into 3 bigger categories that I've seen with working with the different organizations, these would probably be the ones. But yeah, happy to hear all of your views on this.
Thank you for that, Vanessa. And we've got a couple of people who have made some reflections on that as well. Jen, hi Jen, thank you for being here. Is saying that it also takes willingness, and that's a big hurdle. Also takes willingness, commitment. It takes commitment, willingness, absolutely. And Chris is saying, of course, if you turn the wide community away, then nothing will change. We need to persuade the majority to change, not to demand. A lot of truth in that. We definitely can't demand, because as much as we are pressing, we're going to get, a counter press towards us. We definitely can't turn, wide community away. I do feel that it's not necessarily through persuasion, but definitely through coaching. Through coaching and creating of safe spaces, and also addressing those identities of the white people and creating safe spaces where they can address their concerns around the identities that they hold as white people. So thank you for those comments, and Vanessa, thank you for outlining those 3 levels of gatekeepers, and I must say I do agree with those. Amrita.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would just like to add, Vanessa, of course, I agree with you 100%. It's at every level. And I just feel, like agreeing with Jen, I think it's everybody. Everybody is a gatekeeper of DEI. In fact, like I would say, even I was a gatekeeper of DEI until like a few years ago, until I knew the intricacy of this work, of the the expanse of this work, how big it could be, because I was only coming at it from my own lived experience. I was only thinking about my race or my gender, but there were so many other things. So I feel like, we do lack that. We lack that understanding of other people's lived experience, and that makes us the gatekeepers. And until, we're willing to bridge that gap, and until we're willing to learn, willing to invest that time and effort into, doing our own research or learning, or as Vanessa said, hiring somebody outside of the firm and coming to talk to us, we're not going to be able to make any substantial change. And that is why change takes such a long time, because people's vision is limited to this much, but we have to expand it to this much so that they're able to really perceive the details that they're missing out on. And that's why coaches are brought in. That's why our work is so continuous, because there even after like a one-off 2-hour workshop, you're not going to be able to convince people to see the perspectives of other until they do the research themselves. In Vanessa's example, for the associate to actually go out and seek help and bring somebody into the firm, that would have to come in from within. And without any motivation, without any personal gain, because that is the kind of work this is. It's very complicated, and you can't just understand it based off on your own experience. But I love that it's there is an opportunity to learn here. There is an opportunity to grow, and so many people are willing. And that's why nobody wants to alienate anybody. As we mentioned with the white community, we're not singling anybody out, because there are people from each and every community that are gatekeepers. It's not just one community, it's pretty much everybody. If I think about my own community, like the men perhaps in my community could be gatekeepers, or perhaps there's a caste system back in India where I'm from. Perhaps the upper class are the gatekeepers there, or the lower classes. You never know, what kind of resistance they're holding in their mind. And that's why this work takes time. The policy, of course, you can come out tomorrow and make a policy that, yes, we have to treat everybody equally. That policy has been there for years. It's taking that much time because we're changing mindsets, we're changing people's perspectives, and that takes time.
Thank you, Amrita.
Just quickly, I just wanted to add something to that as well, Amrita. I thought that was really good. Also bringing in the idea of the caste system in India and just bringing in your personal lived experience. I think that's so powerful. I really want to challenge us a little bit more on this question before we jump to the next. I know, Baba, you're already like on this, on engaging us in the questioning, and it's so exciting. But you know, why do we think that it is taking so much longer for us to see progress for race, ethnicity, and Black people, right? Let's not just hover over this. I do want, because if we do look at DEI, this is an area that is just so far behind, right? And I think it is important in this context, and I do want to bring this to the conversation, that the fact that we cannot decouple progress with white privilege in this specific instance. Why do I say this? Because when we look at a society, or when we look at an industry, let's bring the legal industry back into this, and I feel sorry for them, but it's part of the industry, it's the industry that I was part of. We have to understand that white privilege is at play. So if we ask the question, why is it taking so long? The answer has to also be because some people want it to take longer. Some people are enjoying the white privilege. That is a fact and a reality. So when I say that we have to be strategic about it, I'm not saying that we should be ignorant of this fact, right? Racism is still at play. So if we try to dismantle this issue of progress, specifically for race and ethnicity and Black and ethnic talent, we have to understand the power of privilege. Because I can, yes, stand up for myself, but what if I'm not in the industry? Black people can stand up for themselves, but they're not represented in the industry. So how can they bring in change? How can they be gatekeepers if they're not in front of the gate? So we have to understand that if we are in a group of privilege, there is some sort of responsibility that falls within us. And if we are silent to that, we are supporting the status quo, right? And that's a very clear message that I have also when I do my work with organizations. I want to bring in an example of privilege. A group where I find myself in when I'm talking about privilege is on the topic of colorism, right? I did a big talk series on colorism for US Black History Month, which is this month, different organizations. In short, colorism is the preferential treatment of lighter-skinned individuals like me towards dark-skinned individuals, right? So hold on a second. All of a sudden, Vanessa is in the group of privilege. I find it is my responsibility in a situation like that to speak out against colorism, which I did, right? I host talks, I host series, I raise awareness on this specific issue. Why? Because it's much easier for me to speak about it than, for example, for my husband who's dark-skinned. Okay, so I want us to really go away from this talk today, not just to take on all this fantastic information, but really do some deep reflection on which group are we part of? What gatekeeper are we really? If I want to be a gatekeeper as a Black individual, am I in front of the gate? And if not, maybe my white counterpart should be helping me. And if they're not, is their white privilege still at place? And is that a reason why we're so far behind? LGBTQ+. So much progress, but it's also made up of mainly white middle-aged men, right? So we have to look at what is really going on here when we talk about diversity with specific focus on race. But this is just me just jumping in a little bit with this perspective again. But I think it's important to bring the conversation about white privilege in as well.
Mm-hmm. Thank you for this, Vanessa. And actually, you're alluding quite nicely into sort of the next part of the conversation that I wanted to have with both of you as well. But before I do that, there are a couple of things, because I don't want to brush over what you've just talked about, because it's so important. And there have been a few people who have added some comments in here as well. So Jenny's saying, I'm not sure I agree with the white community, but whiteness hates to be challenged. This comment made me chuckle a little bit. Yes, of course, whiteness hates to be challenged, and that's something that I mentioned earlier as well. Resistance to change is the biggest gatekeeper. Yes, but I would want to shift the agency here a little bit. Who is the doer? Because we are here talking about resistance, and resistance is not the doer. So we here really need to articulate who is the doer for this resistance. But yes, I agree with that. And Chris is sharing a personal story where he's saying that I was asked to deliver an EDI training to a business which had employed another business to deliver that training, and that business used the opportunity to attack the white people in the room of their privilege. And that's an interesting, again, statement about attacking white people. Those people left the room, then went on a strike for being called racist. And I was asked to come in and re-deliver that course to put the damage right. That's what I mean by persuasion. If you attack the majority, they will get defensive and nothing will change. Now, so this is an interesting example, and it probably supports what Vanessa just talked about. Around the fact that, and obviously I don't know who in this case was delivering the session in the first case, and that's probably something that is worth unpacking as well, and we're going to go into that a little bit as well. But also this attacking, I would love to sort of explore what that attacking means. Was there a fist fight? What does attacking means? Because if someone is simply bringing the topic to the table and someone feels personally defensive about it, then I would want to explore if it's actually attacking, or there's something that we personally need to unpack. Why are we feeling uncomfortable about it? And why do we not want to engage in this conversation? And why do we at default and from get-go deny that someone else might be experiencing this world, this workplace in a very different way? And so, and then again, the second part of it as well, that, the fact that, Chris has been, brought in to put this right. Again, quote unquote, I would want to use that for right. But also, I wonder whether there was a level of comfort with the fact. So Chris is just saying the presenter was a young Black lady, right? So here we are going into a different kind of conversation. So when the young Black lady came in, she was attacking people in the room who decided to leave the room. But then a white person came into the room, put this right, and suddenly no one was attacked. So are we here talking about the delivery of the material, or are we talking about the receivers and what the receivers are comfortable with and how they perceive the information to be distributed by two different people? So here I just want to sort of, sorry, did you want to make a comment on that?
Yeah, I would just like to add, of course, until I knew about, who delivered the first presentation and who delivered the second, it of course becomes very clear. But initially what I was thinking is that, when we come face to face with the fact that, even I know companies love to use unconscious bias or, unconsciously using their privilege. But I think when we come face to face with it, there is that feeling of discomfort, because they've realized that, they are the ones who've been in the wrong, and it's never a comfortable situation. And I feel like that makes them feel unsafe. They think that they're unsafe when they're not actually. It's just a feeling of discomfort that comes with, when you're learning new material, knowing that what you previously had known was wrong. But of course, it changes with the fact that, with the Black woman, with this, as the stereotype goes, they're always seen as attacking, as loud, as angry. And that's what they saw as an attack, because if a Black person comes and tells you that you're doing something wrong, nobody's accepting that. But, if a person from your own community or a white person is saying that, it's suddenly okay or acceptable. I think that is a bit more problematic than I would say was first let on.
Yeah, and you're absolutely right. And what Chris is talking about here is nothing unique. This week alone, I have spoken to two of my Black colleagues in this space, and both of them had scenarios and experiences where they had been emailed or fed back about their anti-racism training, that people or a particular person within the receiving end, so the person who was in this training, felt attacked, personally attacked by this training program. So then the question here would be, am I going to the training provider and telling her off in this scenario for making someone feel uncomfortable, or am I actually taking it on board and thinking, actually, what is going on here, and is someone making me feel uncomfortable? Is there something a little bit more I need to unpack here?
Yeah, it's such an interesting dynamic, I think, at play when it comes to this struggle almost to find the right tone, to find the right way to deliver. I think, some things cannot be sugar coated. And I'm not going to go much more into this specific example because I think both of you just did such a good work and task in dismantling this. I want to give a contrary example to that. Maybe this will reflect a little bit of light on that. So I attended the DEI training. This was for different law firms, actually, not just one. And the deliverer was a white male mid-aged person, and they kicked off the conversation with saying, today we will focus on all the differences, right? We are not going to focus on racial disparities alone, or racial misrepresentation alone. We will focus on all the different groups. We will focus on, what brings us all together in terms of the unity and in terms of a cultural inclusive, for a culturally inclusive culture. Now, this was, and I know this because I spoke to the DEI person afterwards who was part of organizing this talk. This was a panel, so she wasn't the only one, and this was supposed to be a racial equality / inclusion delivery kind of training. But the focus now was shifted away from that towards a much more comfortable way to deliver seemingly the same message, which it was absolutely not, right? So can you see the problematic here, right? So if someone comes in to bring a targeted training, again, I cannot comment on the specific scenario because I wasn't there. That can, of course, sometimes feel uncomfortable because guess what? Change is discomfort. We are not programmed for change. None of us are. So it is always uncomfortable. If I talk about colorism and I'm in the group of the privileged, I don't feel comfortable. Does this feeling justify me to walk out of a room? Absolutely not, right? So, but then the flip side to that is generalizing and making the majority feel comfortable. Again, going against the minority and looking at what are actually their pain points. So we need to really take a step back for our organization and identify which group are we part of. Are we part of the ones that feel offended and walk out once it gets uncomfortable? Or are we part of the group that starts generalizing everything? And hence why we're going back to the initial problem that I outlined, or we all outlined, which is the progress for racial equality is so slow because we're not allowed to talk about it. So there's so much happening there. And I just thought this was a really good example. And a lot of feedback actually was that it was way too general. This was a culture workshop. It wasn't actually about race, equality, or inclusion. And in fact, we should have focused on the racial disparities and issues in this specific instance.
Thank you, Vanessa. And I want to take this topic in probably another level deeper and talk about the gatekeeping specifically within the DEI community. And there's probably, another conversation, another day's worth of conversation we can have here. But specifically recently, this has been something that's been playing on my mind, even as I've been engaging in several conversations with seemingly with my colleagues in this space, but also, so recently, for instance, I had a conversation with someone wanting to debate what we should call this space. Is it DEI? Is it EDI? Is it JEDI? Is it DIB? Is it actually, this is all, we shouldn't be calling it any of that and we should be talking about something else. And the thing is that if we as DEI practitioners feel that the most important work in DEI space is to debate what the acronyms and in what order they should be, then we haven't gotten the memo about what this work is about. So that, and so this is probably, again, one of the reasons how we as DEI practitioners become the gatekeepers, because we find these very surface level conversations more important to get into a debate and argument about than actually doing the work and getting uncomfortable while doing the work. And there's just so much to when we talk about the DEI community specifically. At the end of the day, DEI community, not DEI community, the DEI industry, if I can call it that, is an $8 billion industry. And since the 2020, the number of people who have entered this space have increased by over 30%. So there is a lot of people coming here for their dime. And so the question here is also, who's coming here to actually create positive impact and who's coming here for very different reasons. And so while we are in this motion of imagining, reimagining, and create and inventing ourselves ultimately as an industry, we can get caught up in that and actually trip over our own work. And so when it comes to sort of, DEI gatekeeping, there is a lot there. So for instance, another great example is how we talk about each other in this space. So if someone has been doing this work pre-2020, they often look down at people who have joined this work and actually been engaged in this work since 2020. Or, and again, for instance, people who follow the bandwagon of creating and quoting business cases, and quoting, McKinsey and different, viral what's the word I'm looking for? Research and studies that are not peer vetted and actually do not talk about causality. And so, these are some of the ways of how we sing and preach to acquire, but at no point we sort of take a step back and think about actually how am I saying the quote unquote right things, and how am I actually preaching to the choir that is the very blocker or gatekeeping to the progress. So I would love to sort of talk a little bit about how we as DEI practitioners can often become the very blockers and gatekeepers for the progress that we're trying to make.
Yeah, I can start with that. And I love this topic. I am like when somebody asks me, like, how long have you been working in this space? And I love to tell them, it's been over 2 years. So so you joined before 2020. So you knew about this. Like, it's some sort of badge of honor, but it isn't. And this is also because DEI is not a regulated industry, which is both a good thing and a bad thing. And there's been a lot of posts about it as well. Like, there are so many certifications coming up for DEI. And even while hiring for DEI, nobody's really looking for lived experience. Like, if you go on job descriptions, we still don't think of lived experience as actual experience that can be used, that can be leveraged to affect change. And I think that is where the problem lies. That we feel that people who have degrees are more qualified than people who have lived experience, because we've never done that, and this is so new for this industry. But that is what I love. Yes, there are no certifications, but there are so many people who are passionate about it. And yes, Baiva, you're right, there are people who are coming in for a variety of reasons. Sometimes maybe this is money, and sometimes, of course, it's passion. And to your question, I think it's upon the DEI practitioner to ask themselves, why are they doing this? And if they're not doing it, unfortunately, for the right reasons, they're just going to perpetuate more harm than they're looking to solve. And it's not about certifications, it's not about degrees, it does not matter. But if you're not able to really do work and do good work and really work towards this, I don't think, it's the best industry then, because this work is emotionally taxing, and every day, when you come home, it's so defeating to know that there are going to be people who attended your talk, they're still not convinced, they still keep on resisting what you're trying to say, they're still going to find problems with it, they're still going to say, we can't even say this anymore, or we can't even do this anymore, and that's going to continue to happen. And if you're not able to handle that, if you're not able to get on board with that, it's never going to be easy. And to your point, about the fact that, we're still fighting over should it be DEI or JEDI. I think because those are very palatable things to talk about. They're acceptable, talking about the name, talking about subsurface level things. Nobody's willing to go deeper. We still, don't talk about colonization openly. We still don't talk about slavery openly because those are not palatable topics. Because, then we have to reckon with our own contribution. Then we have to see where we are coming from, what was our part in it. And I think that is the problem. And that's how we are becoming gatekeepers, because we're not willing to dig deeper, because, fingers can be pointed at us as well. But I believe, if fingers are pointed at us, that is an opportunity to grow. Like I know that I'm still learning. Like I sometimes, accidentally say ableist things sometimes. And I know like there are people correcting me, or if I use the wrong pronouns, there are people there to help me out. And if I say the wrong things, or if I'm, stereotyping somebody in my head, I have that group to correct me. And I know that if they are not, I can also do this by myself. So I think those are a lot of considerations, and I said a lot of things, but Vanessa, over to you.
And I want to just, if you don't mind, Vanessa, I'll just make a quick comment here about the fact that, that we are, as DEI practitioners, often perceived as a container of all information, all tools, all answers, and that we definitely can't make any mistakes. We can make mistakes, same as anyone else can mistakes, but then there is a difference between people making mistakes and getting away with it and actually being kept accountable for it, whether it's self-accountability or being kept accountable by someone else, and then doing better next time. So it is okay to make mistakes, and we will be making mistakes all the way through this progress in this journey. So I just want to make that point as well, that there is probably that level of anxiety as well for DEI practitioners, that we have to know everything and we can never get it wrong. Thank you, Amrita. Vanessa, please.
Yeah, such an interesting conversation. To be honest with you, and I don't know, maybe it's gonna rub people the wrong way, but if you started before 2020 or after, honestly, I could not care less. Maybe it's the route that I took into D&I. I obviously I was in the private practice for about 4 years, and if I was in this for money, I should have probably stayed in private practice, but not left and started my own company. So I think if I don't even, honestly, this is quite a new conversation for me. I wasn't aware that there was this happening within the DEI space, where we pull each other down, or we try to I don't know, lecture each other around what you are allowed to do or what not. But I'll be completely honest, I don't have the time. I actually don't have the time to spend my time on LinkedIn looking if someone put the right pronoun, or if someone used the right BAME or EDI or DNI. I don't have the time for that. So if I see someone in the space, let's put it quite bluntly, if I see someone in the space that I don't agree with, honestly, I'll probably go my own way, because even just engaging in that, I balance out the time. Do I spend the time now correcting this person and lecturing this person, etc., when I think results will show, and give them follow-on work or not? Someone will call it out at some point. Or do I invest my time in actually in the work that I do, which is working with the companies changing their race and ethnicity and strategy and policy? So I don't know if I have that much to add on this. It's an interesting topic, and something that I will definitely take away and think about a little bit more. But from personal experience, we're much stronger united, and this is something that we all know. Yet we somehow find a way to say, hey, I didn't really like what she said on this call, or are you sure this is the right way to put it, etc. Now, there's nothing wrong with good criticism, constructive criticism, and especially if you have a good trust relationship with this person. But don't feel entitled to bring someone else down just because you think you are an expert in this space. This brings me back to the very first thing I said when I introduced myself. I am not a DEI expert. I focus on race, ethnicity, and inclusion, right? I don't pretend to be a DEI expert. In fact, when I left my legal job, I said I don't want to be another DEI consultancy. No, because I was the head of the DEI committee at the law firm. So the last law firm I was with was Fried Frank, and I worked with a lot of DEI consultants in some sort manner or form, or looked into them to maybe bring them on. And I said, this is not what I want to do. What I do want to do is focus on the specific problem that we have with race and retention. So that was how it started off with. So there's a lot of entitlement I found within this sector right now, when it comes to me telling you what you did wrong or what you did right, etc. And I think again it goes back to this empathetic standpoint point of view. What are we trying to achieve here, and how much time do we all have? If this is about real progressional, deep, long-lasting, committed change, this is not the right way. And yeah, I think Baiba, you said this at the very beginning, people talking about should you say this or should you say that. Important conversations, 100%. But personally, I don't spend more time on this maybe than 10 to 15 minutes. This is just my personal point of view, because there's so much deeper issues and discussions that need to be had that people don't seem to be focusing on. So that is what I focus on in this specific space.
And you're absolutely right, because then these surface level conversations become the distractors in this work. And people feel that if they have had the debate around whether it's DEI, JEDI, and how would you wordsmith it, or around, some, basic trainings, then they are done with this work. And this is the thing. And it's, and that's where, if we, I think as DEI professionals, engage, let alone facilitate these kinds of conversations, we become the very gatekeepers for the progress in this work. And so right. I would love to, as we are so quickly coming to an end of this conversation, I would love to, and we've just got, we've covered quite a bit of ground. We have gone into some very, very, important things, and have created a very interesting conversation within the comments section as well. So thank you everyone who's engaging in that. But I would like to conclude just touching a little bit on, and as you ladies can send our guests away with, what are some of the ways, some of the key way, or the key 1, 2, 3 ways of how we can check in with ourselves to ensure that we do not become the very gatekeepers and blockers for the progress that we're trying to make. And I'm not going to say that this would be specific to DEI professionals, I guess, holistically.
I think we were both thinking there, Amrita. Okay, I will just go. Yeah, I think this is it's a loaded question. I think we started with such a loaded question. To be fair, they were all pretty loaded, and I loved it. But I think fantastic. It was such a fun discussion, and I think actually before I go into this, what we want is discussion. I can't see the comment section, but I love that people are sharing their views. I love that people have different opinions to this. And I always say this, if you disagree, let me know, right? Because this is exactly how we get to the truth. So if we can achieve this, a very good, engaging conversation and chat box, then I think we did something right here. How can you assess whether you are the gatekeeper of the progress in DEI? I think I'll just put this on me personally. So when I was an associate, and before I made the decision to go into full-time DEI work with starting the company, I looked at the problem, right? In order to, and this was also a little bit of a business case, but in order to bring about a business, in order to think of a solution, I needed to first identify the problem. So I think before you even think of the gate that you're keeping, think of the problem. What are you trying to solve here? What are you trying to prevent? What is the one area that you want to focus on? I think right now, after George Floyd, after Black Lives Matter, after the pandemic, we are a bit scattered all over the place right now in the DEI community, right? Can we all just focus on one area and not pretend we are the master of all? Because we are the master of none then. Focus on one area that we want to commit to for the next 6 months. not 12 months, next 6 months. For me, that's raise and retention, the retention rate within law firms or corporations. Why are we seeing that Black talent is leaving 2.5 times more or earlier, 2.5 years earlier than their white colleagues? That for me was a problem that I identified, and this is for me something I want to focus on. Now, then we can start talking about the role of the gatekeeper, right? So for me, that role was, okay, what information am I going to let into this specific problem area? How can I bring this information into this problem area? And how can I deliver this information? It goes back to what Chris was saying in the examples with the problem of delivery, or was it the problem that she was Black, etc. Of course, we need to do some sort of training around delivery because it's such an important part of what we do. So this was something that I looked into. What skill set do I need as a gatekeeper? What's the job description of this gatekeeper when I talk about race and retention? So I broke it down for me and my team when we now speak to organizations, law firms, etc., on this specific topic. And then you can assess, of course, your own biases. This is the job description, but I still seem to be doing this. What is happening here, right? Is there an own bias at play? Is there privilege at play? Is there something at play that I didn't even realize was there? Why am I only putting forward certain information and the other? Those sort of questions then come into play. But I think this is a good way to navigate this very big question and stay focused. Let's stay focused. If we're not focused with our approach, we're not going to see progress. I can guarantee this. We will be exactly in the same boat in 2023, in February on the 18th, if we don't have a targeted and focused approach.
And you raise a very important point around the focus and structure, the fact that we are scattered. You use the words, and I really agree with that. And I think that is the DEI space, and anywhere and everywhere really, but DEI space is a perfect fertile soil for that, just because it is so unstandardized and unregulated. And we as comfort creatures, we do love a good structure, we do love a good process. And the fact that this place doesn't have as much process, and if we are not focused enough, then of course, we can go, all over the place. And then, another thing that you talked about is the job descriptions and skills. That's another big point, because again, going back to what I mentioned, that the number of people coming into this space at this, increasing number, because everyone wants, a piece of the pie. But then a lot of people come into this space from a space of good intentions and passion. And that's great. And we need that. And everyone's welcome to come here and do an active and conscious work. However, this work requires skill, and what we don't talk about enough. And one of the things that we've done as part of Bakau Consulting Inc is we've conducted a job description audit of 100 diversity, equity, and inclusion job descriptions. So that's something that I'm going to be sharing next Friday in the newsletter that I talked about. So once again, here is the website where you can drop your email to receive that. And those job descriptions are all over the shop. So this morning when I was going through with my colleague who was helping me with this, I said to her, I can't go into the LinkedIn Live without a volume now, because it's just very, very infuriating watching these job descriptions and some of the things that organizations put in those, because it's so unstructured and because there is no standard of what that should look like. And again, this field and this space is very vast, and there are a lot of things that we can touch, and not necessarily one job description will always fit all environments and all geographies, but there are certain things that I feel are a must for coming into this space.
Yeah. So I would just like to add, for the question about assessing whether you are the gatekeeper of the progress, I would just talk about what skills you're lacking, and what kind of information you're lacking. When I talked about the perspective, a lot of us don't even know our own histories really that well. So if you don't know that, you are going to be a gatekeeper. If you don't know what happened, and if you're going to be ignorant, I read this quote somewhere, and I'm going to find who said that on LinkedIn. They said that ignorance is highly funded. And it is so such a profound quote, and I just want it everywhere, because that is true. This misinformation, this ignorance, somebody is actually funding it for you to not know the truth. So it's up to you to go and find out, if the algorithm is targeted towards you in a certain way, find the other side, find out what's going on, find out what you don't know, find out those gaps. And as to your point about needing skills to do this work, I'm just going to say what my mentor told me before I joined this space. They told me that think about the skills that you already have. Okay, think about what you are good at and only focus on that as you progress through it. Don't try to do everything, because like Vanessa said, you're just going to be ending up with a lot on your plate and not getting much done. So if it's just one niche, so if you just want to work because you understand the perspective of women, you want to work in that space, just do that. Yes, intersectionality is important, but also understand that your skills can only attest to that. But of course, if you bring in more people in your team, if there are other people, if you're working with other consultancies, you can bring in that perspectives. But it's not a bad thing to stick to just one thing. And I know, like, we criticize people a lot when we say that, you're not thinking from an intersectional perspective. Yes, that is important, but you also have to judge for yourself what you are good at. Okay, so that you don't end up perpetuating more harm than you set out to. If you're doing this work with passion, do it, continue to do it. Of course, do it. We want more people, but understand where you bring in the strength, or find out, what is missing from this space and learn how you can bring that in. So those are your options. And I would say, that's how you assess. Do your research, keep learning, because the space changes every single day. And the more you learn, the more you'll find out things that you didn't know before, more perspectives. And that's just going to keep you growing in this space. And it's okay to focus on one thing if that's what you want to do.
Thanks, Amrita. And just the last comment I want to make on what you just said around, focus on, which area or what is your zone of genius and how are you adding value from that. But then also pass the baton forward. So if there is something that you don't know about, don't pretend that you do, pass the baton. So I do feel that actually DEI practitioners need to be well networked. They need to be well networked and have people from all kinds of areas and intersections represented in their network, so they are not in their bubble. And we talk about these bubbles quite a lot, and we point fingers at our leaders saying, oh, you are all in, your circles are all white. But then sometimes we need to point that finger back at us and say, actually, let's assess my circle. And those are some of the things that you've talked about. And the last thing, so I guess the last advice from me on the same question would be, keep on checking in with yourself. So if you're one of those people in the middle of a training session who's got the audacity to stand up and walk out because something has triggered you, and then you go and complain to HR for someone attacking you, sit with that before you send out that email. Sit with what is exactly that triggered you. If you are maybe this conversation triggered you, sit with that. What is exactly that triggered you? Is it the content? Is it who it came from? Or is it something else? And that is the work that we need to do. We are our own life's work. That's where it ends and begins. Assess that. And once again, I just want to go back to that Chris's example, just because I had two of my colleagues saying the same thing to me. And who knows, maybe it was one of them was maybe in this exactly session. But if you're one of those people who've ever walked out and complained, or has got the privilege to do it and get a Black person hired from delivering an anti-racism training, sit with that. The problem might be not at the person that you're pointing your finger at. So I just want to say a huge thank you to both of you ladies for engaging in this conversation. There's a lot going on in the chat, and there was one question from Gabriella, which I probably won't have time to touch on today, but actually it's a very important question that we might go to in some of the next sessions. And she's saying, why are there so many DEI experts that are not part of minority groups, but instead they are part of predominant privileged groups? A loaded question. Gabrielle, we can be friends. We love a loaded question. But let's leave this question, unless, any of you ladies have got sort of a quick comment to make on this at this point.
I mean, the only thing I'll say to this, and then you probably have to have another 45 minutes to go into it, is I just want to say that this is not just an observation, this is a fact.
Right.
And that's important to recognize. The majority, I would say 85 to 90% of DEI leaders in the legal industry that I've come across are white, come from a white background. And I think it goes back to the very beginning of the conversation that we had with which progress of DEI we saw happening more than others. If you ask a DEI person to deliver an anti-racist training, that's almost like asking an HR person to build a platform for a platform for feedback or surveys. What am I trying to say? They are not always, and that's absolutely fine, but we need to recognize that equipped to do such trainings and to deliver such. And the markup of the DEI leaders that we're currently seeing can inform us of the work that has been done and has gone before us, and it has been done in the past, and what might need to change a little bit. This is why I think, you need to, as an organization, recognize where you need help. If you don't recognize it, if you don't recognize, hey, I want to get Baiba on board, I want to get Amrita on board, I want to get Vanessa on board for this and this and this specific thing, I think that's problematic as such. If you can't see the power of third-party providers, because we have this issue that the majority of DEI leaders currently are from a majority group. That is a fact, and there's a lot of research on that.
Thank you, Vanessa. And thank you for the question, Gabriella. And probably that's a whole topic that we probably need to go into and explore that. So thank you, ladies. Thank you, everyone who's joined us in the chat and created such a rich conversation. Thank you for your courage, for being here and sharing your experiences. I really do appreciate and value that. And I look forward to sharing the findings of the DEI job description audit next week in the newsletter. And other than that, I'll see you in March when we will have another series of LinkedIn Lives, and specifically we will be talking about culture immersion. So that's going to be the topic for the theme for the month, and we'll be talking about how do we immerse ourselves as practitioners in the culture, what does that look like, and I look forward to welcoming you as part of that conversation. Ladies, thank you so much. Everyone else, have a lovely weekend, and I look forward to seeing you again in March. Take good care.
Thank you, Barbara.
Thank you. Thanks so much.